Alright, Jesse, cue it up. Everybody in their places. It's time to go.
We rolling? Yeah, we're rolling. Okay, let's get it done, everybody. Let's go. Hey, Reagan, how's my hair? Is it okay?
Poxy, they can't see you.
Alright, come on, let's go. Let's do this, people. Poxy, start on page 4. Get the lines right this time.
Right, I got it this time, I swear.
4, 3.
Come on. It's time for the Ghost of Hollywood.
Well, hello, wall crawlers, and welcome to the 17th episode of The Ghost of Hollywood. I'm Poxy Leonard here with Miss Ragan, and today marks a first for the show as we have finally developed an episode that won't get canceled if it airs during the daylight hours.
Yeah, I sort of think it could actually increase the likelihood the show will get canceled.
Why?
Because our normal airtime is set specifically, so almost no one will hear it, for that very reason.
Well, I mean, the producers already pulled me aside before the show, did their thing, and I can see JP over there kind of sending me the cutthroat signal as we speak, so with all that in mind, I figure we're probably okay. Plus, our guest on the show tonight is none other than Kevin Eastman, who alongside Peter Laird developed the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles back at their Mirage Studios in the day, and I mean that literally.
What literally?
Mirage Studios, like nothing new to hardcore Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle fans, but there was no studio. Much like this show, there was a basement, a dream, and the bare minimum to work with.
Aw, don't play that, Poxy. We aren't in a basement, and the only dreams anyone has here are your delusions of fame and stardom.
Oh, come on now. You can't count me out yet. I still got some time. I mean, I'm not that old. If I wanted to be like a pro sports player or physicist, I think I'm probably too late there, but where I've set my sights, there's plenty of time.
And where have you set your sights exactly?
I'm not telling you.
Because there is nothing to tell you, delusional moron.
Are you gonna do the thing again?
Well, I don't know what this thing is, and it sounds creepy. Also, unlike you, I'm capable of hosting this show all by myself.
Oh, don't lie. You know I carry this stuff.
Oh, well, if I'm being honest, I'll let you know exactly what you can carry.
Oh, ding, there's the bell. Has anyone seen my teeth?
So, back to Kevin Eastman. Now, anyone alive in the late 80s and 90s certainly remembers the height of Turtlemania, whether you were in the arcade, watching the cartoon, reading the comic, or too old to understand what the hell all this Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle madness was about. So, today, Poxy and I will do our best to squeeze what information we can out of Kevin in the very little time he has available.
Oh, I think short and sweet is a great opportunity for us here. I mean, and for those of you listening in for the first time, I'll explain why I said that, right? So, now see, wall crawlers, it's all simple. When crazy movie people, to quote Richard Dreyfuss, will let me ask them questions about their life, I tend to go long, as they say.
And this all being the result of your unfulfilled desire to become the next Howard Hawks, right?
Well, I like to think of myself more as like I'm on my way to becoming the dollar store Bogdanovich.
I could see that either way,
Oh, well, I mean, my real goal here is to interview all of these people about all of this cool stuff they've done, hoping that I'll think of something cool that I can do, and then me and you can ask me lots of questions about it.
Let me reiterate, delusional. Plus, Kevin isn't exactly a movie guy, so to speak. It's true, he has been many things.
Like the owner of the 90s Batmobile.
Which Zach already told you that you cannot ask him about.
I mean, unless I can ask him to drive it, I really got nothing.
Your mother would be so proud, Poxy. Just think, you cruising down the road in Kevin Eastman's Batmobile.
Oh, make that moment real, freeze it in time, and I'm James Dean, maybe. James Dean, he has nothing on me.
I hear you, big guy. But the fact that this conversation is limited to exactly half an hour means you better be well prepared on what you have to say.
Oh, have you seen this script? They have me sounding like homeboy from Hot Ones, except I got no wings to give, man. Also, I'm definitely not this articulate, but if they want me to lay some questions on him Brian Linehan style, I'm game.
Who is Brian Linehan?
Well, he was famous for interviewing movie stars and whatnot back in the 80s and 90s, but his questions were always like really sharp, and he was very affectionate to his guests, which are two words I can hardly spell, let alone things I can try to be.
I think you'll be fine. I mean, you definitely get a fanboy.
Oh, I'm a fanboy.
In this instance, it's fair, but will you please take the red eye mask off?
Oh, come on, looks good on me, you know it.
No one can see you. Plus, you're more of a Michelangelo anyways.
But I'm inspired, If I can be serious for a moment. What is interesting about Kevin Eastman, which I doubt we will have a lot of time to discuss, or he probably won't want to discuss, is a lot of what he did as a result of his success with the Turtles. I mean, when I was going over all the research material, I probably spent 3 hours reading that interview with Gary Groth that Kevin did in 1998 where they discussed Tundra Publishing.
Hang on a second, Poxy. Let me fill them in. So, for those who don't know, Kevin founded a publishing company called Tundra in 1990. And the premise of this was for Kevin to allow other artists to publish creator-owned content at an 80-20 split, with advertising costs utilized from the 80.
And mind you, this 80% was for the artist, leaving 20% for Tundra to capitalize on. Obviously, that's not a lot, and a very young Kevin Eastman ran so far with these ideals that he literally took on more than the company could ever consider handling, and then opened Tundra UK, expanding the company even farther, all in under a year. But when the financials made a startling appearance in the red, it wasn't long before Tundra would merge with Kitchen Sink Press, the latter relocating its business to Northampton, Massachusetts.
And despite strong output, the merger would prove disastrous for Kitchen Sink, who would in turn sell off the company to investors in 1994.
Now, around this time, Kevin would buy Heavy Metal magazine, and I don't remember the exact year, but somewhere in there. And he would retain ownership over the magazine primarily until 2014. And with this venture, it would actually provide much more success than he had at Tundra, and it would also provide financial support to the Words and Pictures Museum, which he operated in Northampton until 1999.
And for those of you not familiar with the Words and Pictures Museum, and I cannot speak from experience, but in reading previous interviews with Kevin, I'm putting together this mega museum for comic books and narrative art, stuff like that.
Yeah, this is going to be difficult for me.
Why?
Because I have a lot more to ask than what I've been given here.
You just want a fanboy.
Did you know that he owned one of the battle tanks used in Red Dawn? What?
1 hour. We have 1 hour.
I give up then. I've spent my entire lifetime with the Ninja Turtles. What good's an hour?
Well, Kevin is still incredibly busy and very involved with the Turtles and all kinds of other projects that we don't even have enough time to adequately cover here.
Yeah, I was going to check out the Biz and Buzz thing he and Simon Bisley have going, but there's been a lot of talk around this new NECA toy line products that came out a few weeks ago as part of the Holothon thing.
Yeah, I read about the Fugitoid release in the report sent over from research, but what impressed me was the first volume of the IDW collection. I liked its ambitions, and it really had a genuine TMNT grit to it.
Yeah, what do you think about the upcoming release of Last Ronin?
I'm actually going to ask him about that to get a little more insight, but it seems like a piece of work that'll definitely be essential to the TMNT archive.
And I'm going to tell him about how I used to dance around the room in my red bandana with my plastic size to the cartoon intro when I was 7.
Don't tell him that.
Why not? I mean, I need a little sentiment here. Like you said earlier, think of my mother.
Did you really used to dance around the room like that?
Oh, hell yeah, like every other kid in America, and that's why I'm not embarrassed about it. But let me tell you, rewinding that videotape to the right spot over and over really allows me to appreciate the advances in modern technology.
Sure, because you can just look it up on YouTube.
And dance around the building, play the TMT arcade machine in the studio lobby because I'm a grown-up who spends money irresponsibly. Speaking of which, you think you'll sign my arcade machine?
Probably. That'd be pretty cool, actually.
Yeah, it would be. And I can brag to all my friends and stuff. By the way, have you ever heard the whole history of the TMNT live thing?
What's that?
All right, so let me tell you, Ray. You missed a wild time at the end of the last century.
Are you going to tell me about the live thing or what?
So TMNT Live was basically like the Turtles putting on a rock concert. It was literally the Turtles putting on a rock concert.
That sounds kind of silly.
I mean, I can agree. But when I called my buddy Kelly the other day to tell him about this episode, because, he's a big TMNT fan, he went into the spiel about seeing the whole Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles live thing as a kid. And then he's like, man, it's actually a pretty cool experience. And he proceeded to rub the whole life-changing experience in my face.
Oh, so you have never seen TMNT live?
Unfortunately, no. But I did see Power Rangers live in the late 90s. And all the kids in the arena had to power together with our really expensive light swords they forced our parents to buy so that we could take out Lord Zed at the end of the show.
You're deviating.
Well, it was kind of relevant.
Sure, whatever. Anyway, let's take a quick break. I'm Miss Reagan here with Poxy and Laird. And when we return, our guest, Kevin Eastman, well known as the co-creator of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, will join us here on the show to discuss his history with Peter Laird, everything TMNT, and what lies ahead for his work at Kevin Eastman Studios.
Oh, that's right. So stay tuned, wall crawlers, because you are listening to The Ghost of Hollywood.
You are listening to KBOO 90.7 FM Portland, streaming live at kboo.fm. KBOO Community Radio relies on support from listeners like you so that we are able to continue providing the community with a voice powered by the airwaves. To donate, please visit our website at kboo.fm. A red donate button is located at the top of the page. Simply click here and list the amount that you would like to donate to KBOO. While you're at it, leave us a message telling us why you support KBOO. As always, thank you for your continued support of KBOO Community Radio.
Want to be in the know for all things Ghost of Hollywood? Check out our website at theghostofhollywood.com for all the newest episodes and updates.
And don't forget to listen every other Friday live on KBOO 90.7 FM Portland. If you're not local, you can also find us live on kboo.fm. And while you're there, please consider donating to Portland's very own listener-powered radio.
Welcome back to the Ghost of Hollywood. I'm Poxy Leonard here with Miss Ragan, and tonight we're speaking with co-creator of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and legendary comic book artist, Kevin Eastman. Thanks for joining us on the show, Kevin. How are you?
I'm doing great, thanks. Thanks for having me on.
All right, let's get to it. Although this episode won't air for another week or so, today marks another significant event for TMNT with NECA's Holothon release of the character Fugitoid, which you and Peter Laird had developed prior to the Turtles, remembering that the two of you were working on Fugitoid at the time you decided to draw Michelangelo. What does this event signify for you personally?
Oh, what a wonderful memory. Certainly it was when I first started working with Peter Laird, because we both write and we both draw, so we were having just a ton of fun, sharing ideas, swapping ideas, and you can not only express them verbally, but you could also doodle up the characters that you had in mind and then bounce things off one another. And we'd often, most of the time, and throughout all the early years, we would be doing it in the same room. So this takes me right back to that time, nearly 40 years ago, where we were having those moments as two bright-eyed kids just looking for following the footsteps of our hero Jack Kirby and wanting to be cartoonists and comic book storytellers and those kind of things. So it's quite a wonderful memory to be having again today. So never far away.
Now, in a recent interview with Jamie Loyette, discussing the Holothon event, you said, "It's really been a joy to be a part of the original process and then watch it from afar while people, far more talented than I am, bring it to life in another way, which is just wonderful." Revisiting this thought, how has the contribution made by countless others since you and Laird developed the Turtles changed the way you perceive the Turtles as you go through your life and continue developing new content for the TMNT universe?
It's inspiring, I guess, comes to mind right away. And what I mean by that is when Peter and I were inspired and created the first 15 issues, which basically you could imagine all the key characters, Casey, all four Turtles, Casey Jones, April, the bad guys, Shredder, all the components were there. The foundation, the structure of all things in our Turtle universe were there. And then as each issue went on, it sort of expanded. We then started working with different artists, bringing in sort of ideas that they had to add to our universe. And that continued as we evolved into additional comic books. More importantly, the animated TV show, which we had full-on animated writers looking and bringing ideas to the table to fit into, say, a 22-minute format, those kind of things. But we loved their ideas, their input, and it was a different version of the Turtles. The Turtles originally were intended for an older audience, so they had a bit more edge to them. When we were working specifically on the cartoon series, which we had full approval over, we knew it was for a much younger audience. So we knew things had to be softened, things had to be taken down to a different level, which we were very happy to do and enjoyed the process quite a bit. So that evolution, as it's grown through, different versions, from the 2000 series to the 2007 Kevin Monroe movie to the different live action movies, each artist brings a unique vision to our characters, which to me is energizing. It's exciting. It's and I would always say it's not always my favorite version of the Turtles, but it's an exciting version of the Turtles, because there have been some favorites and there have been some that I've liked a little bit less, but all of them are a great deal of fun, and I enjoy the process very much.
Now, Laird had experience publishing newspapers, which is what led to you meeting him after finding a copy of his work on Scat, as the legend goes. So it's been said that you're very different people, and being that Laird is 8 years your senior, how did this factor into the early days developing TMNT and in defining the roles of rapidly successful project that stemmed from this working relationship?
Well, I think it was one of the things I liked about working with Peter. He was definitely 8 years more polished as an artist than I was, and I learned a lot of things, not only technical things, but different aspects of the things that he liked to draw. For example, like he was really good at robots to me, and things that he could draw spaceships and robots and things that I thought actually looked like they would work, which is, thus we arrived at the evolution, the creation of the first idea, which is the Fugitoid. But I'll tell you, one of the greatest things about working with Peter is that there might have been literally 8 years between us, but mentally, I think we were still 12-year-olds because we were still these, like I said, bright-eyed kids that just loved comic books, loved storytelling, loved the process of creating. So when we would work together on our ideas and continue to work for many, many years on those ideas and creations, it was very much that. It was two excited, young-minded, similarly minded people just living to create and enjoying the process together. So, and the best part of having a slightly different of opinion, that always is focused on story first and trying to come up with the best possible story and the best possible adventure. You can have differences of opinion. You might think it wants to go that way, and I might think it wants to go this way. But you compromise, you meet in the middle, and it's all for the same common goal: is to tell a great story and have a good time doing it. So it's a good process.
All right, well, the Turtle Power documentary brings TMNT fans into the depth of early days at Mirage. Despite the shared fame with Laird, your relationship with other collaborators at Mirage, such as Steve Levine, goes back even further. What can you say that hasn't already been said about the time you spent working or traveling with Steve, or Ken Feduni-Wicks, or Janice Cohen, to name a few? And looking back on your youth, what motivated this collective ambition when it was hardly more than a silly idea?
The evolution of the what I would call Mirage Studio was just wonderfully organic, and the process was probably, I guess that was my favorite part of the process. Is that, for example, I was in high school. I was friends with Steve Levine. He was an artist. I was an artist. So we used to hang out a lot together, and he was very funny. I always thought a lot of my inspirations from Michelangelo were based on Steve Levine. He was kind of like, I used to joke that he was our high school's Robin Williams. He was always going off on some bizarre tangent that would have us all in stitches. But the process was, Steve was brought into the studio where back in the early days, Pete and I were doing everything, and my penmanship was slightly better than Peter's, so I got stuck doing the lettering. Peter's.
I've read you didn't like doing the lettering.
No, it's like, well, that's the thing. Okay. Peter was a much better speller than I was, but I had a much better penmanship. So I started doing the lettering, and it just was tedious, and it was like, ugh. And so Steve was at it, and I said, "Hey, Steve, do you want to learn how to letter a comic book?" And so Steve joined specifically as a letterer. So he not only lettered, pretty much all the early Mirage comic books, but when we did reprints of them, we actually had him go back in and re-letter for continuity's sake, and he was much better at it. But Steve is a very talented artist, and when the Turtles evolved into a lot more licensing, he became his art style was a lot more cartoony, so his style really lent very well to the Archie version, the animated version, and those kinds of things with the exploitation of the Turtles in that arena. But a lot of the other guys that came in, Dan Berger, Ryan Brown, Eric Talbot, Jim Lawson, many of them came in as artists in their own right. Mike Dooney, they were publishing and doing their own comic books. Some of them we started publishing, but as the licensing and we call it the empire, if you will, the Mirage Studios empire grew, we needed more physical hands-on to handle the art chores for not only producing the regular comic book, but again, the licensing material. A licensor wants to produce a board game. The first thing they do is go outside and hire an artist to design and do all the artwork for the board game, which then has to be sent to us for approval. Our offer to them, and what it worked out was, we've got in-house guys that would come pre-approved. So we got to not only get our friends who are very, very talented a lot of work, but it was a streamline the process because we were providing artwork to licensees that was pre-approved and ready to go right to print. And a lot of those guys designed a lot of the toys for the Playmates toy line that we're using in the cartoon and Archie comics and the actual toy line. So we had a good time, but it built very organically. It was sort of as needed, and the company sort of grew out of that, which was. Yeah,
great. I was about to ask with that with Mark Friedman and Surge Licensing. I know that that all played a central role in licensing the characters, and that landing that deal with Playmate and the television show being produced with Murakami Wolf Swenson. So as Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles found its niche and was cemented in youth culture across the globe, your Turtles would undergo, the change in story and style and mass and colors and all sorts of ways. But you've talked about, the creative control that you were able to have and the opportunities you were allowed to allot other people. So what was it like seeing, and you've already touched on this a bit, but again, if I'm not being redundant, what was it like seeing TMNT evolve in this format? And, what do you recall about your involvement with the time with its ongoing, conception day to day? It was
really not repeating, because it's a very good question, and it's a furtherance of what was going on back in those days. But it really was, when we think of today, people talk about character multiverses. Well, with the Turtles, we had a multiverse almost from the very beginning, because we had the original black and white comics that were, again, and we, out of all the other exploitation and the representation and the entertainment projects and the variations of the Turtles you saw, the original one was always the original one. We kept it sort of older, intended for a much older audience, and in that format. But then we had the kids version of the multiverse, which was the younger, hipper, more commercial, if you will, which we had a control over and say over, and worked with so many talented people to bring that to life. And then when I look at the first movie that we did, the first movie that Steve Barron, Jim Henson, and the amazing Todd Langdon, who wrote it, adapted from our comics, that was sort of in the middle. You had the black and white comics on one side, you had the cartoon series on the other side, and the movie, to me, fit right in the middle, where it was intended for both audiences. The parents that had to bring the kids to see the movie, and the kids that wanted to go see the movie. And so we had these different universes, and as those continued to grow and expand and change and evolve, as the genre did, that the audiences did, some of the original audience drifted away into other characters and other things. Some of them came in later as we became more generational, but the adaptation was always still grounded at the same heart and soul of four turtles: April, Casey, Splinter, the idea of family, respect, hero, true to yourself. All those elements that gave the turtles a heart and soul from the very first issue has always remained in each of the version that you've seen. However, it may be sort of look a little bit different this way, a little bit different that way. It may be approached differently stylistically, but the heart and soul is there. And I think that was, certainly in the early days, that was what was most important to Peter and I, is that they don't take characters that we created and intended to be this way into something else. So it was great that the people that came in and saw the characters really wanted to keep that passion and keep that flame alive, and that's worked out very well.
All right, well, how about the development of the stand-up arcade machines or home video games? Where do you feel the work is represented well, or poorly for that matter, in these products?
I love them. I'm glad you brought them up, because it was one of my favorites. In fact, I chuckled immediately when you said it, because I immediately go to this, is that when the first NDS game, the first the first home console game came out, people used to come up to us at shows and they'd be angry with us because they thought
it was so hard.
Yeah, it was so hard. People would come up and be like, "Why did you guys make this game so hard?" But it was, I never got through the water level either, just to be fully upfront, fully clear.
You should have tried it at 6. Yeah. It was hard at 6.
I think they probably do it easier than old guys like we. But anyway, the process was really wonderfully creative and educational, in that the processes of the components to create a game are so complex on so many levels of what you can do and can't do, and how it's, you look at those early versions of the game, especially the simplicity in them and how that's changed over time as well. But the story element was never really a factor until much later. But the concept was all about the action and the fighting. So to me, when they created the Turtles arcade game, where you could play with, so you could each pick a different turtle and you could all play together. But so we were involved in the process to the point of what we could be. We had approval of the final look and those kind of things. But man, what a process. And I really loved it. I think the games were so much fun, and just nothing but fond memories of those.
When the Turtles became what has today been called the Green Beetles of comic and cartoon, how overwhelming and difficult was it to manage the unprecedented personal and financial success of your career at a time when the world was at the height of celebrating your creation? It's
I don't want to say it's a common story, but it's a familiar story, in that it was complex in the point that the personal wear and tear on a friendship that Peter and I had for it surrounded comics and creating comics together and being friends together and going and hanging out and going to the movies together and doing just a lot of stuff that friends do together. As the business grew, I say in 1988, pre-Turtle launch, we were probably spending 90% of our time being creative, drawing, and physically hanging out and doing stuff related to the creative part of the Turtles, and 10% of the time doing the business side. A year later, it was a complete opposite. Suddenly, because we owned and we created and we controlled these characters and wanted to have say over everything that was done with them, it was now 90% of our time was taking care of the business side, and 10% of the time doing the physical creative. 10% was just hard to come by. So it got to be the point that wears and tears. So pretty much every time we would get together in the studio, there was like, there was complications and there were issues and there were lawsuits from people suing us that they said they created the Turtles first. So it was just never getting together as friends anymore. It was always like just everything was a struggle, and so I think it just wore to us. So finally, I sort of pushed back a little bit. I know Peter had to push back a little bit, and remember, sort of, we got into this for the right reasons, but at the same time, we still had to run a business. So that was a part that sort of suffered. Financially, we both did different things. I formed a cartoon museum. I formed a publishing company called Tundra. I did some rock and roll like things. Spent my money unwisely. But it took a while to, go through that process before you circle back to what's most important, which is friendship and creativity. And so I'm back drawing comics full time, and I've been doing that for the last 15 years, and that's where it all matters. That's where your feet hit the pavement. It's like the heart and soul. Takes you right back to where you got into this in the business in the first place. So, Peter and I have repaired our friendship since then for sure. We do communicate regularly, and I'm happy for that because he's the Turtles wouldn't be the Turtles without each other, and that's the thing that you got to remember in the end. We were all sad when the Beatles broke up. And we're glad that they, found the respect for each other later on, and before it's too late. So it's a process, and I'm happy for where things are right now.
The rapid rate for success of the comics, merchandising, television show, and eventually the first movie, which brought you the opportunity to meet your Turtles in reality, would lead to a rush at the door to develop sequels, rip-offs, and comic variations such as the Archie series. In your eyes, how did this branding, for lack of a better word, challenge the creative output to maintain continuity with TMNT, now vested in so many markets?
There was, I go to the multiverse aspect of that again, because it was really fascinating to us, is that we could see and oversee when we had, a dedicated team. And as I mentioned earlier, a lot of the artists that came into Mirage Studios initially, again, artists in their own right doing other projects, and some of them we published at Mirage Studios. When we started focusing all things on Turtles, that a lot of the guys that were working on other things now, say, for example, Dean Clarraine and Mitch, there's Steve Danberg, a lot of people circled and worked on the Archie series. So that was produced in-house. That was in a couple offices down the hall from where Peter and I worked. So that was being done there. The cartoon stuff, the material that was coming in, that some that Peter and I would handle, and that was sort of in our offices here. The licensing stuff was, in another office, again, just down, a couple offices down, and the artists actually producing, visual and elements supported that. So it was all done in-house, which was fun because we had our own workshop, and it was easy to oversee, I guess, the whole empire, if you will, and control it and keep the continuity where we liked in each of the respective Turtle universes, the younger one, the older one, the licensing one. So it was quite an experience and quite enjoyable at times. And a lot of people, I think, felt that, Pete and I signed a contract, took a check, and just sat back and watched the whole thing unfold. But it couldn't be more the opposite. We worked probably 90 hours a week at times on every aspect. You'd spend all day in the office, and if you were submitting notes to one of the cartoon shows or things like that, you went home, and after dinner you worked on the creative stuff to then had to be delivered the next day, and that kind of stuff. So it was hard, it was intense, but we were glad to have it, because these were our characters. We owned them, we controlled them, we created them, and it was quite an honor to have that ability and to have that say over your creations, because heroes like Jack Kirby and other people that inspired us initially, the giants we stand on the shoulders of, didn't have the say in their creations, and most oftentimes didn't participate in the success of them. So we knew we were quite fortunate and happy to work hard for it.
Well, how did some of the efforts and other creative differences, such as the inception of Venus de Milo, hinder you and Laird's partnership over the Turtles? And do you feel that some of your innovations, which were initially less successful then, have presented new opportunities for the franchise in later years?
when I look at the evolution of, say, Venus de Milo as a character, for example, because that has had controversy in the past. The very short origin of Venus de Milo is we were writing a fourth Turtle movie for New Line, and part of the New Line Cinema, who produced the first three. And the idea that everybody agreed to, including Peter, was adding a fifth turtle. And so we initially had a fifth turtle that was a male turtle. We named it after Kirby, as our hero, Jack Kirby. And as the story goes, it was turtle was exposed at the same time the other turtle was exposed. He floated further downstream and was raised and grew up differently. And then it was part of the element, the foundation, the construction of that movie plot. When that movie didn't go ahead, we then entered into agreement with Saban and Fox Kids to develop a Turtles live action show. Kirby, the fifth turtle, was a key element they really picked up on. They said, well, that would be a great addition to the live action TV show, is to add a fifth turtle. The kids would love it, and a new audience and things. So it was a male turtle that was going to be added through most of the development of that, until we got close to the very end, when it was suggested that it be changed to a female turtle. I, being a fan of, say, Lieutenant Ripley and so many strong female characters, I said, well, that makes sense. I could see it would be great to have, besides April, you have another strong female character in that. Peter didn't agree and didn't like that idea. Not that he's has anything against women or anything. He just didn't like the concept. He didn't like the way it was presented and didn't like the way it pitched. And he had a lot of good points. I ultimately said, let me run with it. And I said, I'll make it the best that I can. And let's see if it works. And so he stepped back. I produced a show, and it was the least successful of some of the exploitation of the Turtles as characters. But that's part of the process. When you look at, say, the first three movies, I think I like the first movie and the third movie the best. The first movie the best. The third movie was one of my favorites. The second movie I didn't like as much, and there was different reasons. Like, I thought it should have been Bebop and Rocksteady, not Token and Razor. And there's a lot of different stuff that happened in the second movie that I think could have been done better. So that was creatively, that was my least favorite. But when you talk to fans, the second movie tends to be their favorite, the first one and the second one. So it's when you look at different iterations of the Turtles, it's a perspective sort of thing. Some were more successful, some were least successful. And it's just you never know, and you never know what the response is going to be. When I went into working on the IDW comic series 11 years ago, we took some risks, and we thought there might be some issues with some of the things that Tom and I were changing with the story. Fortunately, it was embraced, and it's been the longest running Turtles comic book series, which has been fantastic. When Ciro Neely did the 2012 Nickelodeon animated series and wanted to do it CGI, fans were up in arms. They hated the idea that we're doing him in CG, not the traditional animation. That ends up being one of the fans, even the original fans, some of their most favorite Turtle animated cartoons since then. It was just sort of, you got to give it a chance. The Michael Bay produced movies, I think, weren't successful or as successful as they could have been. I think they could have done things differently, but I didn't own or control them at that time, so they were what they were. So you never know what you're going to take. People are already asking me, what do I think about what Seth Rogen's going to do? Let's find out what Seth Rogen's going to do. I'm excited for him. He's bringing a vision to it that he thinks is exciting and creative, and we're going to all experience what he sees in our characters when it comes out, and I'm excited to see it. But the same for Last Ronin. I just finished issue 5 of Last Ronin, which was a huge risk. It was a very edgy, older version of the Turtles, which I was excited to do, but it could have failed as easily as it became a success that it is. So you never know. It's kind of like going to Vegas, I guess. But sometimes you win, sometimes you lose.
Now, you mentioned words and pictures earlier. An incredible effort to represent the art of some of the aforementioned, such as Jack Kirby, Frank Miller, Richard Corbin. I know Simon Bisley stuff was in there, to name just a few. As a serious and lifelong collaborator of this artwork, what was your ambition for words and pictures at the time?
My ambition for words and pictures was to firmly state or restate what I felt that strongly my whole life was that comic book art as an art form is a true art form, not only an American art form, but it's an art form that's existed for years. I figured that I feel the first people that painted in caves were telling stories with pictures. Those were their words, hieroglyphics, Aztec, those massive, beautiful Mayan reliefs. Those were words and pictures combined to tell a story. So to me, I wanted comic books as an art form to be respected more as an art form. So I wanted to show it in a museum setting, oftentimes showing the completed work. When you buy a comic book, you have the cover, and then you've got, say, 20 pages of interior art. Whenever I could show the entire comic book so people could see the cover and then read it, walking along the walls of the museum was to show it in that form as it originally was. So that, and I feel like it had been looked down upon as people with lesser skill do comic books. You can't make a living from comic books. Art teachers, I had some great art teachers, but I've been laughed at when I would tell people in the early days what I want to do for a living, including my parents thought I'd never move out of the basement because I wanted to be a cartoonist. Well, you can't make a living being a cartoonist. Nobody makes money at that. That's what fools and idiots think it's something you can survive at and support a family. So I just wanted to bring it to a respect level that I felt it had and has gotten since then. And that was my mission with Words and Pictures.
Kevin, before we go, what can you tell us about the upcoming release for The Last Ronin this summer, and what lies ahead for your work at Kevin Eastman Studios?
The exciting part of The Last Ronin was I wanted to be a complete story, 200 pages, have a beginning, middle, and end. It was based firmly on an idea that Peter and I had in 1987, and this is sort of an adaptation, a furtherance of that. We took a 20-page outline and built it into a 200-page story, so I wanted it to be another level, another addition to the Turtles multiverse, if you will. And that was a dream. And I feel like, it's been 35 years in the making from its original creation. The last 3 years, myself, Tom Waltz, the incredible Escorza brothers, Ben Bishop, Antonio Delgado, all that creative, the whole art team that brought this together have worked their butts off for 24, 25 months solidly. And I'm really proud of it. And I'm excited that it's wrapping up, and the fan response has been better than I could have hoped for. It's doing what you love and sticking to your guns and hoping for the best, and this time it worked out. Like I mentioned earlier, just as easily it could have failed, but we're thrilled and excited to see the full collection coming out this summer. And then speaking of Kevin Eastman Studios in general, what's exciting is Courtney and I are going back on the road starting this month. We haven't done conventions since 2020, so we're going back out. I think we've got 6 shows this year, and people want to find out
where all are they at? Where are your shows where your shows taking place?
You go to www.kevineastmanstudios.com and you can find out. No, you go.
All right. We'll keep it there. No, we're gonna throw that in. No worries.
No, I was being silly. It was my car salesman shtick.
Oh, you're pitching to us.
No, but Lexington, Kentucky is this month. We're doing one in Huntsville, Alabama. We've got one in Montreal this year. We're doing a really fun one towards the end of the year up at Granite State up in New Hampshire, which is kind of evolved into a Turtle Con, if you will, where they're having different turtle voice actors, as well as a wide array of different turtle artists from different aspects of the turtle universes there. And that's also home turf. My wife's family's from New Hampshire. My family, including myself, obviously, is from Maine. San Diego Comic-Con, of course, that's home turf for us as well these days. We're excited to be back on the road doing that. And then Kevin Eastman Studios is a company. We've got other projects we're doing, Drawing Blood, Radically Rearranged Ronin Ragdolls, a number of other things. But visit the website and you find out all kinds of information you might find useful or not useful.
All right, sounds good. And there you have it, wall crawlers. Kevin, thank you for taking the time to speak with Ragan and I tonight. It's been a pleasure.
No, it was a pleasure talking to you, and it was fun.
For more information on Kevin Eastman or for exclusive access to his upcoming projects, please visit fan.kevineastmanstudios.com.
And we'll be back here to wrap things up shortly. I'm Miss Ragan here with Poxy Laird, and you're listening to The Ghost of Hollywood.
You're listening to KBOO 90.7 FM Portland, streaming live at kboo.fm. KBOO Community Radio relies on support from listeners like you so that we are able to continue providing the community with a voice powered by the airwaves. To donate, please visit our website at kboo.fm. A red donate button is located at the top of the page. Simply click here and list the amount that you would like to donate to KBOO. While you're at it, leave us a message telling us why you support KBOO. As always, thank you for your continued support of KBOO Community Radio.
Want to be in the know for all things Ghost of Hollywood? Check out our website at theghostofhollywood.com for all the newest episodes and updates.
And don't forget to listen every other Friday live on KBOO 90.7 FM Portland. If you're not local, you can also find us live on kboo.fm. And while you're there, please consider donating to Portland's very own listener-powered radio.
KBOO Portland.
And we're back here on the Ghost of Hollywood in lovely Portland, Oregon. I'm Poxy Leonard with Miss Ragan, and we've just wrapped a cool little interview with our friend Kevin Eastman, who is still hard at work on his Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles all these years later.
I'm proud of you, Poxy.
Why?
You didn't ask him about the Batmobile or his Red Dawn Army tank.
Well, I think he sold the Red Dawn Army tank, but like I said, if I can't ask to drive it, I have nothing to ask.
Anyway, we'd like to thank Kevin Eastman for taking the time to join us on the show today, along with his assistant, Jasmine Arriaga, for her hard work coordinating between Kevin Eastman Studios and our production team here on The Ghost of Hollywood. As mentioned previously, for more information about Kevin Eastman and his tour dates and all kinds of other cool stuff, check out KevinEastmanStudios.com.
You can also check out our website at theghostofhollywood.com for all the latest interviews and stream The Ghost of Hollywood wherever you get your podcasts, so please listen, like, and subscribe if possible.
We'd also like to thank KBOO Community Radio, specifically Asia and Tammy, for their hard work getting us on the air for a teaser during the daylight hours. It's worth noting The Ghost of Hollywood airs regularly on KBOO Community Radio every other Friday between 3 to 5:30 a.m.
Yeah, sometimes we get a little raunchy at the late night hour, so that's where we typically live if you happen to find us on the air in real time. Not that this happens too often yet, but you can write to Reagan and I or send general questions or suggestions to our production team by reaching us through the contact page on our website or writing to our attention by letter directly to KBOO Community Radio.
So stick around because we have plenty more in store as Season 2 continues.
Alright, are we done pitching yet? I mean, the credits are starting to go a little deep here.
Maybe they're having a stall for time?
Well, this was a 1-hour time slot, but we definitely aren't going to meet that goal. Anyway, you think he really could beat the water levels?
I don't know what these water levels are that you're talking about.
So, on the NES game back in yesteryear when I was born, there was this water level called the Dam, where you had to swim through tight spaces that basically electrocuted your character if you got too close.
What made it so hard?
Well, you know, unhook these bombs, right? Or like disarm them, whatever. And it was practically impossible not to get too close to anything.
I think he was being honest with you.
Well, you know, Reagan, what if they made a game for the Ghost of Hollywood?
What would be the goal?
I don't know. I mean, I figured this could all just be a natural part of the outcome of the inevitable Poxy Mania.
Oh, what are you on today? Babe Ruth show up in your dream and make you feel important?
Did you just hit me with a Sandlot reference?
Hey, it's daylight. I had to leave my weapons at home.
Oh, so now it's daylight, but during the interview we were 2 weeks ago at night.
I guess the script likes to time travel.
Well, I suppose it doesn't really matter what time it is for us now, since we can do this as many times as it can be downloaded.
Like Burns and Allen on the TV screen, Poxy.
Good night, Reagan.
Good morning, Poxy.
Good night, wall crawlers. Good morning, radio listeners.
I am so confused right now.
You know what that means.
That this has been another episode of The Ghost of Hollywood. I'm Miss Reagan here with Poxy Leonard, and until next time...
Good morning and good night.
You have been listening to another episode of The Ghost of Hollywood. The Ghost of Hollywood is directed by Zach Flannery. The show is authored by Chris Klon and Zach Flannery. Composition samples and score by Jesse Garcia in Pineapple Nightmare. Production management by Mary Flannery at the Electric Garden Company. And mastering by Grady Sizemore and Microphonic Meltdown in Portland, Oregon.